Tactic 1. Love bombing. Imagine you walk into a room of strangers, and within 20 minutes, every single person in that room makes you feel like you are the most interesting, most special, most deeply understood person they have ever met. They compliment you. They remember your name. They ask questions about your life, and actually listen. They make you feel, for the first time, in a long time, completely seen. This is called love bombing, and it is the single most effective recruitment tool every major cult in history has used. It was documented extensively in the People's Temple, under Jim Jones. In NXIVM, in the Moonies, in Heaven's Gate, every single one started the same way, with overwhelming, almost suffocating affection. Here is why it works so devastatingly well. Human beings are wired to reciprocate kindness. When someone invests enormous emotional energy into you, your brain creates a debt, a psychological obligation to give something back. By the time a cold target realizes the warmth was manufactured, they have already invested months of their own emotions in return, and the withdrawal of that warmth, which always comes, is used as a weapon. Tactic 2. Isolation. Once you feel bonded to the group, the next step begins, so gradually, you genuinely cannot feel it happening. First, the group starts to take up more of your time. Meetings, retreats, study sessions. Nothing is forced. You want to go, because these people make you feel good. But slowly, the people outside the group, your old friends, your family, start to feel more distant. The cult does not tell you to cut them off. That would be too obvious. Instead, they plant seeds. They say things like, your sister doesn't really understand the growth you're going through. Or, people on the outside are still asleep. They can't hold space for where you're going. Within 6 to 18 months, in documented cult cases, the average member had reduced contact with all pre-cult relationships by over 70% without ever being directly told to. Your outside relationships are your emergency exit. Isolation is how they lock that door. Tactic 3. Thought-stopping techniques. This is the one that researchers call the most sophisticated and the most invisible. Every major cult installs what psychologists call thought-stopping techniques. These are rituals, phrases, or behaviors that members are trained to perform the moment a doubting thought appears. In some groups, it is chanting. In others, it is prayer. In NXIVM, it was a specific breathing exercise. In the People's Temple, members were encouraged to report their own doubting thoughts to leadership. The function is always identical. The moment your own brain starts to question something, you have been given a tool to immediately silence it. And because the tool is framed as spiritual growth, using it feels like a virtue. Over time, members stop completing critical thoughts entirely. Not because they are stupid, because they have been trained, systematically, to interrupt their own thinking. At the exact moment, it becomes dangerous to the group. Robert Lifton, the psychiatrist who first documented this, in 1961, called it sacred science. The belief that the group's doctrine is so complete and true that questioning it is not just wrong, it is a moral failure. Tactic 4. Identity replacement. Every cult, without exception, gives its members a new identity. Sometimes, it is a literal new name. In the Moonies, members were renamed. In some Buddhist adjacent cults, members take spiritual names. In NXIVM, the inner circle were branded with the leader's initials. But even when there is no formal renaming, the process happens anyway. The group creates a sharp distinction between who you were before, called the uninitiated, the asleep, the suppressive person, depending on the cult, and who you are now, inside the group. Your old self is reframed as broken, lost, or incomplete. This is not an accident. It is the most efficient psychological trap ever devised. Because once you have invested your entire sense of self into a new identity, once you have told your family you have changed, once you have built your social world entirely inside the group, leaving does not just mean leaving an organization. It means destroying the only self you currently have. Cult leaders understand this with terrifying precision. You are not leaving a group. You are committing psychological suicide. Tactic 5. Loaded language. Every cult creates its own language. Not a different language entirely, just a specialized vocabulary that only members fully understand. Scientology alone has over 300 unique terms. NXIVM called its members students, and its leader, Vanguard. Heaven's Gate called non-members humans, implying members were something beyond human. This works on 2 levels. First, it creates an in-group boundary. If you can speak the language, you belong. If you cannot, you are outside. The vocabulary becomes a wall that separates members from everyone else, including people who might help them leave. Second, and this is the more sinister function, the specialized terms replace the ordinary words members would use to think about their situation. If the group's doctrine is always referred to as the technology, it is very difficult to think critically about it, because the word itself implies it is a proven, functional system. Language shapes thought, and controlling language is controlling thought, one word at a time. Tactic 6. Phobia Indoctrination. You now love the group. You have built your identity inside it. You speak its language. And now, here is the final lock on the door. The group tells you what happens if you leave, not through obvious threats, through stories, through warnings, through the careful, repeated description of what became of people who walked away. They went insane. Their lives fell apart. They got sick. They died. They are spiritually lost forever, wandering in darkness, cut off from the only truth that could save them. This is called phobia indoctrination, the deliberate installation of an irrational, overwhelming fear of life outside the group. In documented exit interviews, former cult members consistently report that the fear of leaving felt physically real, not like a choice they were making, but like standing at the edge of a cliff. The group did not put up a fence. They made the ground outside look like it wasn't there. Tactic 7. Confession and surveillance. Here is the tactic that gives the leader permanent, personal leverage over every single member. Most cults create a mandatory confession system. In Scientology, it is called auditing. In NXIVM, members were required to submit written confessions, including deeply personal sexual histories and private secrets, which were kept on file by leadership. Jim Jones held regular public confession sessions where members disclosed their most shameful moments in front of the entire congregation. This is framed as spiritual liberation, and in the beginning, it genuinely feels that way. Vulnerable, intimate, connecting. But what it actually creates is a perfect blackmail archive. Every secret you have shared is now held by the person you are considering leaving. Every embarrassing truth, every private fear, everything you would be devastated for your family to know, documented, filed, and available. Former NXIVM members have testified that the knowledge of those files was the single greatest barrier to leaving, more than any belief, more than any relationship, more than any fear of the outside world. Tactic 8. Incremental commitment, the foot in the door. No cult leader walks up to a stranger and says, "Give me your money, cut off your family, and let me brand your skin." That is not how it works. That is never how it works. Instead, every demand is slightly larger than the last. Come to a free dinner. Come to a weekend retreat. Make a small donation. Move closer to the community. Leave your job to serve full-time. Each step, viewed in isolation, feels reasonable, or at least survivable. And having taken each previous step makes the next one feel like a natural progression rather than a radical choice. Psychologists call this the foot in the door technique, and its effectiveness in cult contexts is almost without limit, because every commitment you make increases the psychological need to justify that commitment, a cognitive process called dissonance reduction. In plain language, the more you have already given, the more your brain needs to believe it was worth giving, so you give more. And the cycle continues. This is why intelligent, educated, critically thinking people end up in cults. It is not a single catastrophic decision. It is 1,000 small ones, each perfectly reasonable in the moment. The mirror. None of these tactics were invented for cults. Love bombing happens in abusive relationships. Thought stopping happens in political movements. Loaded language exists in corporations, in online communities, in social media echo chambers. Incremental commitment is the business model of every platform designed to maximize your engagement. The reason cult leaders have used these techniques for 100 years is simple. They work on everyone. The only actual protection is knowing the pattern before you're inside it, which you do now.